Hello everybody, welcome to Tokyo. I'm underneath a bridge because the sun is really hot today. We're gonna be talking about, I'm in Tokyo, we're gonna be talking about the end of duty-free, or I guess tax-free shopping in Japan. This is something that's being questioned quite a bit from my community, the Only in Japan community. I get a lot of questions about it. What's actually happening? It seems a lot of people really do take advantage of this service. Now, right now, currently, you can go to places like Don Quijote or a Japanese department store. If you have your passport and a visa that shows that you're a tourist, you don't have to pay the 10% consumption tax, which is 10% of the price of an item. So they're going to be changing that rule in 2026. Apparently, it's still being discussed right now, but the news has picked up on this, and it's an issue that has sparked debate because, again, Japan has what could be 50 million tourists coming into the country in 2025 or 2026, maybe 40 million this year. It's a lot of people that could be impacted by this. How much of an impact would this have by ending it or just altering it? Because I don't think they're going to end it. I think they're just going to change it. But also in Japan, the reason why it's being discussed at all is because it's being abused massively by by people who are coming from other countries that don't pay the tax and resell those items on the domestic market, because the system allows for that kind of an abuse. So I'll get into it in this episode, but before we get into this talk, I want to go over and show you about Japan's consumption tax. You might be surprised to learn that before 1989, Japan's consumption tax was 0%, meaning if you went to a restaurant or a supermarket, you paid 0% tax. The government was funded by income taxes and other various taxes and fees, of course, but it wasn't through consumption tax. Consumption tax happened in 1989. Does anybody know why? I feel like I'm in a classroom right now under a bridge. The reason why in 1989 is because that's when the Japanese bubble economy cracked, and they found that the government had no more, the income from revenue from income taxes went down because no one was making any money. Well, that took a big hit. So the prime minister, I believe, I can't remember who it was exactly, I wasn't here at the time, but he initiated a 3% tax, which sparked quite a bit of debate, but the government needed it in order to do the projects that it had on the book. So 3% tax, and then in 1997, a year before I came to Japan, I think it was Prime Minister Hashimoto enacted it to 5%, and I remember that people were still talking about it when I came to Japan. I know the English teacher world, the people that were there before and after were talking about it. Oh, if you go to buy a can of beer, it's now 2% more expensive. Whoop-de-doo now, because in 2020, we're paying 10%. And even that was very, very controversial. I was here in 2014 when Prime Minister Abe initiated an 8%, and it was supposed to go up in 2016, I believe, to 10%. But there was so much backlash because the economy had never really recovered from 1997. Things are pretty much the same as, in fact, income levels are the same now as they were like 25 years ago. They haven't really raised wages in Japan for 25 years. So when you go from 5% to 8% to 10%, when people making the same wage, people aren't really happy about it. So the raise from 8% to 10% was delayed for like 3 more years. And now it's 8% on food. I think it still is. If you go to a restaurant or takeaway, you'll give an 8% tax instead of a 10% tax to try to really decrease the burden on Japanese families. But for most things, it's 10%. If you go to buy a MacBook Pro at the Apple Store, for example, you're going to pay, what is it, like $2,500? $250 in taxes goes to the government. But if you buy it duty-free or tax-free because you're on a tourist visa, you don't have to pay that, which is actually really cheap compared to what you would pay in the United States. However, there's enough people coming from other countries that sell that for a profit because they didn't pay the taxes. They can make a really quick, like $200 or something off of a purchase. And if it's a luxury item, $5,000, they can make $300-400 off of that. That's kind of a big deal. So there's a market for that going on where they're skirting these laws, and that's why Japan is starting to rethink this tax. So that's the background on all of this. Hope you guys can hear me okay. So there we go. let's look at this article really quickly, and then I'll talk about the repercussions and how this is. This comes from the Japan Times. Actually, the content from the Japan Times has really gone up over the last couple of years, so I'm more and more impressed with them. They're kind of a fringe newspaper back in the day, but they've really done some good work recently. As Japan keeps smashing records after record, the international arrivals, some policy makers say that the country isn't profiting enough from throngs of tourists jamming its department stores and souvenir shops. They're not wrong, especially if they get tax-free shopping. The majority of people shopping in Japan are doing it tax-free. It's crazy, and Japanese really aren't buying as much as they used to. So if spending goes up but there's no taxes going to the government, that's not a good thing. Lawmakers in the political center of Nagatacho, that's where it is, are discussing this right now. And this is where the issue comes in here. Second meeting for a group study. And what they found is widespread fraudulent use of the tax-free system undermines the credibility and fairness of the consumption tax. We can't allow this to continue, lawmakers are saying. And they're not wrong, because if the majority of your income is not coming in because you have a system, that's not good either. Maybe it's tax-free. The government's got to get something out of it. People are enjoying the infrastructure here, and we're glad that they're coming to Japan. But there's just not enough taxpayers to pay into the system. The group has put together a preliminary proposal to submit to the party's powerful tax committee for the 2026. This has nothing to do with this year, so don't worry about it. So nothing's going to change. Then we kind of look at and see what the abolition of the system would be versus the actual situation here. Now, the reason why I think, I'm going to shrink this for a second, I don't think they can get rid of this. This is going to piss off a lot of people that do come here for this cheap taxes, cheap shopping. They could just go to Korea. They could just go to Korea and do this. They don't have to do it, come and shop in Japan. That's maybe 10% of the tourists that come here. They come here for shopping. Maybe that seems like a pretty reasonable estimate. That's a lot of money. They're also, staying in hotels, they're eating food, they're contributing to the economy in other ways, but they're not doing it through tax dollars. So we don't want to lose those tourists as well. So there has to be some sort of a balance. You cannot get rid of tax-free shopping if Korea and other countries have it. But I think what Japan's going to be doing is similar to what France and Italy is doing. The tax-free system has led to some results in the past, but I think now the role has come to an end. That's the feeling of some lawmakers. Since then, its scope has progressed, it's expanded quite a bit. So, look, the current system exempts foreign visitors from paying the nation's 10% consumption tax on purchases exceeding 5,000 yen or $35. So if you buy something that's very expensive, maybe like a new car, I don't know how far it goes, you wouldn't pay 10% on it. And that's a significant amount. If it's a $10,000 item, that's $1,000. And you can buy it and then sell it on the online and pocket most of that money, Somebody's gonna buy it. If it's sold cheaper online than it would be at the store, that's something. On the premise that the goods are taken out of the country. And then those goods are taken out of the country and resold as well. And that's also an issue. For purchases of consumable items such as cosmetics and food products, a ceiling of 500,000 yen. Okay, there's the limit, which is about $3,500. So there is a limit per day. And of course, Don Quixote, I don't think anybody buys that much at Don Quixote, but knowing some of our viewers, I could be wrong. The drastic increase of international tourists numbers in recent years has led to a surge in revenues derived from the tax-free system. Government data shows that there are over 8.1 trillion international yen coming in, and it's in yen, so trillion would be billion. The consumption tax exempted on that amount would be about 200 to 240 billion yen. So I guess you could just take away 2 zeros from that. So it's about, it's a lot of money. I think it's like, hundreds of millions of dollars comes in that is not collected because of tax-free shopping. That's a lot of money. We shouldn't make low prices our key selling point. And I agree with that. I want foreign tourists to understand the true value of Japan. I don't want them to come just because it's cheap. Well, I gotta stop there. Well, Mr. Nakanishi, the vast majority of the reason why you're getting 40 million tourists is because the yen is 140 to the dollar, and it's really cheap to fly to Japan right now. And that's just kind of the reason why you're getting these amazing numbers. Make it more expensive, those numbers go down. It's as simple as that. I really do believe it. I think it could be different in a couple of years. I don't know, maybe not, but there's mixed feelings on this, of course. The tourism in the spring of 2023, department stores have greatly benefited from the influx of foreign tourists and the country's tax-free system. The only one who benefits from the taxes is the government. The department stores make money, but they don't pay taxes on that. On a May afternoon in Tokyo's busy Shibuya neighborhood, crowds of tourists lined up for over half an hour on the 7th floor of Don Quijote to get a tax discount on their shopping. A sizable portion of the floor was set up to welcome the crowds, with the remainder showcased souvenirs as chopsticks and cuddly toys. There is a line for tax-free shopping, a special line. You can't just get it anybody at any register. You have to wait in line for it. But if you're going to be saving $100, it's sometimes worth it to wait for 20, 30 minutes. I think people would come to buy anyway, even if there was no tax-free system. I wonder if that's true. I see it as a bonus that you're getting a tax-free system. However, not everybody feels like that. There's a guy from the UK, a Polish man who lives in the UK, said that he would go somewhere else for the shopping, basically. So you're going to lose a percentage of people, but the majority of people see this as a bonus, it seems like. The 10% discount makes it very cheap to shop. I don't want the system to change, and I understand that. I think the system is made to be very convenient for tourists. Tourists from Japan Japan's immediate neighbors, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, are outspending their American and European counterparts on shopping. So the amount of shopping done is mostly, the majority of it comes from our neighbors, not from Americans that are visiting. Just to put that in perspective, okay? Last year, department stores recorded a staggering 86% increase in revenue from the tax-free system compared to 2023, totaling 640 billion yen, roughly 11% of their overall revenue. It's a lot. So losing this would be a big hit. Let's move along here. I think you're getting the point. Today's exemptions from the consumption tax happens at the point of purchase. That's really important. Retailers verify travelers' visa statuses and input their details as well as information related to the purchases into a digital database introduced in 2021 that was made to make this easier, so that it just became easier to do, right? Don Quijote, it's really painless to do tax-free shopping in Japan right now, which is not a bad thing. So when you leave the country, you don't have to queue up or anything. You just get on your flight and leave, right? But the problem is you don't have to prove what your purchases are. Maybe you sent it home. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you should have paid taxes on it. So there's too many cases of abuse, often involving the resale of tax-free items in the domestic market with a markup. So this happens all the time. Roughly 90% of the 690 individuals who spent over 100 million yen in tax-free shopping left the country with no further checks or penalty. Most of those people who spent that amount of money were probably doing something nefarious with their items, reselling it basically. And I mean, this is part of globalization. It shouldn't be that bad of a problem. I think maybe they should be used to it. Maybe this is much to do about nothing. I'd like to hear your comments about it. This is a live stream, so we're going to talk about it a little bit. Stores that failed to collect the consumption tax as needed or charged a shortfall amount as a penalty. This is big. Last August, the department store Takashimaya made headlines when it was fined 570 million yen. That's a significant amount, 570 million yen, for selling goods without meeting the requirements of the tax-free system. So they're penalizing people. They're cracking down on this for sure. It's a lot of money. As a result, the rampant abuse of the system, a legal amendment was made earlier this year to change the rules from November 2026. So we're going to get some changes. Let's just get to the end of this here. The government aims to welcome 60 million tourists by 2030. I think they're going to get there sooner. I really do. I think they're going to get there a lot sooner. The goal would propel Japan to the top 5 most. I think they're pretty close to it right now. France, Italy, United States. I don't think there's too many people ahead of Japan. With the depreciation of the yen showing no signs of abating and Japan affirming itself they really need to address this now. If they were going to do something, now is the best time to do it. It's going too fast here to really. It's hard to say the system is contributing to regional revitalization or creating any employment opportunities. I can say that it's making an impact. The government doesn't see it that way because the government's not getting their pound of flesh, right? When the government doesn't get their pound of flesh from all these sales, look, Japan's got shrinking tax revenue. We saw the population just 2 days ago. I talked about Japan's population is decreasing by 1 million people a year. So there's less people paying taxes. There's less people paying the consumption tax. So they need to collect it somewhere. And to keep Japan the way it is right now, where you can do a live stream under a bridge that's not going to fall on my head, perhaps they need to find a way to collect that consumption tax from tourists, or at least tourists have to pay some fees. It's like a give and take type of thing, but they got to get the revenue from somewhere, because they're just getting the revenue that's coming into Japan is just going to keep decreasing for the government, but it's going to keep increasing for department stores. So I don't know how they do this, where Japan's been talking about the two-tier pricing system, where tourists pay a different price than locals. But I think you're starting to see now a little bit clearer what the debate is about. If the government has decreasing amount of money for infrastructure, for projects, for things for the citizens, you could see why they would want to make sure that it was fair that people that are visiting from abroad, who also take advantage of the same things that Japan does, pay a little bit into that system to make sure that we have new bridges, we have new elevators, we have new infrastructure as well. And I think that the fees that the airport is talking about, they're really, really small. Now, what is the solution? So what they're probably going to be doing now, starting next year, Japan is not ending tax-free shopping entirely, but it is reforming the system. So that article kind of mentions it, but here's the deal. The current tax-free system, where visitors receive a discount at the point of purchase, will charge to a full-based, refund-based system. They'll have to pay the consumption tax. So that means there's no more line at Don Quixote. You got to pay like everybody else pays. Keep your receipts. When you go to the airport, you're going to get the money back. The reason why? France and Italy are doing it, and there's not a lot of debate on that. And I think they're paying like 17%, or there's probably more tax. The consumption tax, the VAT in Europe is like off the charts compared to Japan and the US. So you're gonna have to pay at the airport, get your money back at the airport. Majority of people, that's not such a big deal. The refund-based system, instead of immediate tax exemptions, visitors will pay the consumption tax and get a refund after customs validation at the airport. It'll be harsh in the first couple of months, November, December, January. They'll learn from it and make it more efficient. More immediate tax-free prices. So I don't think people are coming here just to shop for the tax-free stuff, but I don't think they're going to penalize people fully for wanting to do that. Let's look at a couple other things here before we close this out. Potential for longer queues at the airport, that's true. I think they'll find a way to streamline this, or you just x-ray the stuff and then they'll ask questions to people who look suspicious. I think they'll find a way to streamline this, but it makes a lot of sense. Japan's a country of strict rules, and they crack down on this pretty hard. My moderators know what I'm talking about, which is why this stream might have started later than usual. Removal of certain limitations. The government is considering removing the current maximum limit on purchases of consumables. So yeah, this is all good information, and the change to impact of the international parcel deliveries. So items shipped back to your home country will no longer be available for the tax exemption. And you can kind of understand why. If you're going to be reselling this stuff, Japan wants it. If a Japanese citizen bought it and sold it in another market, they wouldn't get that discount. So it makes a lot of sense. I don't know. I want to hear what you guys have to say here. For the next 2 minutes, I'm going to be taking some of your questions. If you want to chime in here with a question, I will take it and we'll discuss this. But your comments are going to be interesting in this video. Whether or not what Japan is going to be doing, it's very similar. It's exactly what France and Italy are doing, because the system is based, this refund system is based on what they're doing. And even though it sucks, people still go to France. I don't think this is a deal breaker. Buy an extra bag or box to be brought to the airport. Yeah. The thing is, right now, they don't really verify everything, but if they ever do, just like with medication, if you bring in something with a banned ingredient and you didn't clear this with customs before with a letter from your doctor, then you could have issues, but it's not that big of a deal. In the end, this isn't such a big of a deal. For 90% of you, the 90% of you, it's like not that big of a deal. but the government wants to just to crack down on fraud, and if everybody pays a tax, then you can't sell it when you're in the country to make a profit and then leave the country with cash in your pocket and no checks they just want to rid the fraud. But if if this system doesn't work out, they can roll it back. We'll see. Which is what it usually, in the end, it doesn't really matter. That icon looks like Irvin's. How you doing, Irvin? Yeah, it doesn't really matter in the end, but for 10% of you, it probably does. You know what? Let me be honest with you. I travel a lot. I go to these places where I pay the VAT. To save $30, I'd rather not wait in line for an hour at customs, and I just leave without waiting in line. And I've saved my receipts anyways. I've been to European countries. I could have gotten the tax-free. Unless there's no line, I just keep going. It's not worth it. And they do that on purpose, because then you pay the tax anyways. But I feel like I really enjoyed my time in Europe or the US or wherever. I really do. And I don't mind paying the whatever, $30 to the government. It's the least that I could do to make sure that the bridges don't fall on my head. So it's $30 on top of everything else. But for some people, it's a deal breaker or a bridge breaker. I'm really happy this bridge is here. It's hot out here. Sales tax is 25%. That's a different story. If you're in Europe, if you're in Scandinavia, it's a different story. I probably would, depending on how long I was there, I might want my money back. But I understand how the system works. Kamen Rider Road is here. After many years of visiting Japan, I just realized that I never asked for tax refund at the airport before, and when any tax-free place, I just leave Japan without claiming it. Before 2014, when they initiated the 10% tax, it was 5% tax on stuff. You really didn't think a lot about it, all right? Now, since the tourism boom came, 10% is just enough where you can see that maybe you want to get that money back. If they raise the consumption tax to over 10%, then it becomes an issue. 10% is like this line where I could live with not getting that back, where it's just enough where waiting in line would be kind of a pain in the neck, where I'd have to go to the airport an hour before, and I'd have to judge, is it worth $30 for an hour at the airport extra to get that $30 back? It's just like at that line, but you have to ask yourself. Side question, would you do an episode on how to drive in Tokyo and navigate the underground expressways without getting lost? I don't know, because if I made that episode, you'd see me getting lost. I'm working on an episode on something along this lines, Tokyo Pika, so I'm working on an episode on it. It'll probably come it'll come this year, I believe. I'm working on an episode driving in Japan, so every YouTuber's done one. I did one on the old channel, believe it or not, so it's time to revisit that. Michael Sasana's in the house. How you doing, brother? Don't know how I feel about this topic. On my visit to Japan, it really didn't affect me whether I was paying the tax or not. I don't think it impacts anybody unless you're coming here to shop for big items. You're probably gonna get back not a lot. I don't know. Everybody's different. I really do think a penny found is a penny earned. But what's the expression? I think you do have to have your eye on the budget. If you save money, that's a big deal. Save money wherever you can. Don't buy things you don't need. I'm totally on board with that. But sometimes there's a point where it can be an irritant to try to get that money back based on the system, and if it's within your budget, you kind of question it. 10%'s on the fringe. Europe's above it, so I might want to ask that back. It just depends. Everybody's different. All right, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. I would love to hear your question. Maybe I do something more on the main channel, but these kinds of episodes, I think it's important that you kind of figure out what's going on behind the scenes in Japan. This also is rationalizing the two-tier pricing system for tourists in tourist areas and for locals, why they would do something like that. Again, and yesterday or 2 days ago when I showed you the population decline, this is all connected. Japan's losing over a million people a year on a shrinking population. That's less people that are paying into the tax system. And there's more tourists coming in here and they're not paying any consumption tax. And if you stay over, and right now they're cracking down on foreigners that live in Japan that don't pay into the national health insurance, the Kokumin Kenko Hoken system. If you live here for Japan as a tourist for over 3 months, you have to enroll in the healthcare system. But if it's your first year, it's really, really cheap because your threshold is 0. So the next year, you get hit with a massive bill. So if you're here for more than a year in Japan, your healthcare is a lot higher. We can talk about that later. Anyways, thanks for the comments. Thanks everybody for the super chats, you guys there. And I'll see you in another live stream real soon. Mata ne.